As a primary school teacher, I believe there's a clear link between illustration and education. The illustrator Vivian Schwartz, for example, likens picture books to theatre, saying that it's like a performance between the grown-up and the child, and the illustrator is the mediator between that. There's been a recent movement, the No Outsiders movement, which has hit the headlines. Books like this are educating children all about LGBT issues. And finally, educators and educational gurus such as Pi Corbett have written books like this and are all over Twitter advocating picture books and illustration as great tools to teach children inference skills. However, in the national curriculum, I'm struggling to find anything on visual literacy and illustration. So, I asked Martin Brown, the illustrator of the immensely popular Horrible Histories series, for his view on this issue.
The experience the child has with the illustrations is entirely personal. It's entirely private.
Yep.
It's a direct line between the illustrator and the viewer. And for that reason alone, it's kind of, I don't know, it's not really talked about, but it's very special. It's unique, I'd go as far as saying. And so everyone talks about the language as being fundamental to education, but no one talks about visual literacy. And that is so pervasive and fundamental that we don't even think it's a thing. Even maths books at the earliest stage have illustrations. Whether it's non-fiction or fiction. Your ABCs are sits alongside pictures of apples and bats and carrots. It's so fundamental that I think we just take it for granted entirely until you become a name. But even then, it's you're sort of a second-class citizen.
As an educator, the idea of using illustration and picture books to develop children's critical thinking seems quite a prominent practice. But is it a case of my own social media circles narrowing my perspective? Is the status of illustration in education really such an established phenomenon? I asked Martin for his opinion.
If I'm honest, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think there's, amongst librarians and educators, there's a little more recognition for the work of illustrators. We're invited to more things. But no, I think that element, exactly the sort of thing you're describing, is not... I was going to say it's not done enough. I'm not entirely sure what happens within schools.
The illustrator Sarah McIntyre has started the Pictures Mean Business movement to ensure that illustrators get the recognition they deserve. I asked Martin about the need for this and whether the increase in the popularity of non-fiction for children has presented opportunities for illustrators in this area.
If picture book illustrators are second-class citizens, illustrators of non-fiction children's books are third-class citizens.
Okay.
I don't think you could pick up, especially not the old-fashioned, but your standard non-fiction book won't give you a credit of the illustrator on the front cover. In fact, I think you probably have to look pretty hard to find it. What we did in Horrible Histories, it was such an editorial take on history. It was such a personal view from Terry and myself that I think they felt that we had more input. But if you're talking about a Roman village and someone has drawn that, I doubt very much whether he'll make it onto the front cover. Which is sad.
Because there's certain examples. Is it Kate Pankhurst who does the fantastically brilliant women and things? So I think they're illustrators who've gone down the non-fiction route, but I guess they are the author and illustrator, aren't they, of those books? So they do get the credit on the cover.
They can't ignore us then. Yeah, it's like that with Lesser Spot Animals. Who's the illustrator? It's me. So it's so different. They sort of talk to you in such different ways. You've written a book. You've written a book. And I always say, look, the writing's a doddle. I don't know what the fuss is about. Illustrating's hard.
Yeah. Sarah McIntyre advocates always crediting the illustrator either prominently or equally on highly illustrated works, and the author, Andy Stanton, recently offered a counter-argument, hinting that without the author, the illustrator often wouldn't be needed. Does he have a point? Martin's answer offered some interesting points about creative collaborations.
Well, that's true in the same sense that if there were no children's books, there wouldn't be writers to write them. How far back do you want to take it? I mean, that's true in a technical sense. Terry writes the books first, and then I come along and illustrate them. And I guess there wouldn't be a Horrible History if he didn't write them. Well, even that's not strictly true, because I had an idea for something similar with another writer. But it was my idea. I mean, this other book, not what Terry did. We were doing a series of books called Coping with teachers, coping with parents, coping with pets, all sorts of things. And in each of those books, there was a chapter on the history of pets, history of families, history of teachers. And that chapter was getting bigger and bigger with every book, and we were having real fun with it. So I said to the editor, can we do a coping with history? And she looked at me and said, hold that thought. Something's just come in I think you might be interested in. So that's the first I heard about Terry coming to them. But I'd already been working for them, and so I had this idea. So some stuff is actually started by illustrators. But yeah, Andy's technically correct. You know?
Pictures Mean Business also wants to ensure that illustrators are included in any book data systems. This means that we can track how much they contribute to the economy. It also means that illustrators can build their status, enabling consumers and booksellers to cross-reference illustrators' work and allow them to build a following. So, how can illustrators protect their status? Well, intellectual property rights and copyright can play a major part in this, allowing artists to protect their ideas and gain the credit and remuneration that they deserve. More on this in a moment, but first I wanted to ask Martin Brown about his experiences with intellectual property, given the immense success of the Horrible Histories franchise.
I suppose it's like all things with intellectual property. Where's the driving force? Who is the driving force of the creative process? So I guess you could say it was the writer, but it's not a given. And just because it's instigated by somebody else doesn't mean that the other person hasn't picked it up and done remarkable things. Is it Flanders or Swan, and Swan or Flanders? I mean, who is the most creative? You know, is it the guy at the piano or the guy at the microphone? You know, the copyright, intellectual property is ours. I mean, all the artwork for all the Horrible Histories is in a cupboard just there behind me, and so I own it. And basically, the publishers have bought the rights to use it. However, when things become brands, someone owns the brand. Ultimately, now that's sometimes it can be the author, it can be the publisher. I'm not entirely sure how it's set up elsewhere, but I know that when I did the logo for the Horrible Histories, I was hand drawn, and I thought that I had ownership of that. But it turns out when I signed my very first contract, like a band again, like some sort of boy band, I was so keen to sign. I may not have realised, not that I didn't read it, but I didn't even know what the jargon meant, where an intellectual property lawyer would have been handy.
Because I read that, or I heard that Francesca Simon signed away a lot of the rights to Horrid Henry. Yeah. Gosh. So the advice there to other illustrators would be, I guess, be careful what you sign and make sure you know your deal.
Yeah, the copyright's important because it's going to be, you know, that's my pension. To put it bluntly, that's my pension. It's not a well-paid business. I think the average author makes something like 10 grand a year. So the fact that it might have a long tail is really important. Mm-hmm. It's not just us being precious.
A threat to the status and success of UK illustrators could prove to be Brexit. If intellectual property rights help us protect our status, could changes brought about by us leaving the EU challenge this? The Intellectual Property Office recently published a paper stating its goal of an effective IP regime that supports UK innovation and creativity. The government's white paper from the 12th of July 2018 set out a vision for elements of this, including a series of notices for a no-deal Brexit. For example, it states that in most cases, copyright will remain protected around the world due to a number of international treaties and agreements. It all seems very reassuring, but I'm sure that many more questions will be asked as we step into this unknown territory. I spoke with Martin Brown about Brexit, and he made the point that, perhaps ironically, as we leave the European Union, we need to strengthen our ties with our European partners in order to move forward as an industry and protect our status. After all, the publishing industry's biggest trade shows are in Europe. I also asked Martin what he'd like to see happen in order for us to further promote the success and status of illustrators as we move forward.
I would like the publishing industry as a whole to kind of join together and try and promote the industry as a whole. Mm-hmm. Just to try to tell the world, or the UK in particular, that the UK children's book industry is one of the finest book industries in the world. The benefit of that is not just a pat on the back, it's that people who don't have books in their lives might see that this is something that's got worth. Mm-hmm. That's, in this celebrity culture that we have, this is what we want for our children. We want literate, educated, kids exploring the world through literature. Mm-hmm. But if we kind of think that it's a second-class industry, then how can you bang the drum for that?
Yeah. I wanted to finish my presentation on that note, as it brings us full circle back to education. As Martin says, an increase in the status of illustration would mean that great books might reach people who otherwise wouldn't have them in their lives. And that can only mean good things for everyone involved: educators, parents, and the publishing industry as a whole.